They laughed when the quiet girl touched the emerald necklace. Unaware, she was the only person in the room who knew it had once belonged to her family. Rain shimmered against the glowing windows of Bellamy and Company. Jewelers on Fifth Avenue, where crystal chandeliers cast soft gold reflections across polished marble floors and velvet display cases worth more than most American homes. Inside, wealthy clients sipped champagne beneath mirrored ceilings while sales associates in black tailored suits moved with rehearsed elegance between showcases lined with diamonds, sapphires, and emeralds secured behind spotless glass. The boutique carried the kind of reputation that made people lower their voices when they entered, a place where private security guards wore Italian watches, and even the air smelled expensive, layered with perfume, leather, and fresh orchids imported weekly from California. And then Evelyn Carter walked through the front doors wearing a simple cream cardigan, faded blue jeans, and worn brown flats damp from the Manhattan rain. Conversations didn't stop completely, but they softened just enough for judgment to settle over the room. A blonde woman in a white designer coat glanced at Evelyn's clothes and smirked into her champagne glass. Near the entrance, a salesman quietly adjusted his tie and exchanged a look with another associate, as if silently asking the same question everyone else was thinking. Wrong place. Evelyn seemed not to notice. At 34, she carried herself with a calm stillness that almost disappeared beneath her modest appearance. Her light brown hair rested loosely over one shoulder, slightly damp from the weather outside, and in one hand, she carried a plain dark umbrella beside an old leather folder worn smooth at the corners from years of use. Tucked partially inside that folder was a cream-colored envelope stamped with the silver crest of Carter Holdings Legal Division, though the edge remained hidden beneath her hand as she approached the center showroom. "Can I help you find something affordable today?" a salesman asked with a smile polished enough to sound polite, while still carrying the sting of insult underneath. Evelyn offered a small nod. "I'd like to see the Emerald Collection." The salesman's smile faded almost invisibly. Across the showroom, Rebecca Hall, the boutique's floor manager, looked up from her tablet. Rebecca was the type of woman who built her authority through appearance alone. Platinum blonde hair, diamond earrings the size of marbles, immaculate navy suit tailored to perfection. She noticed Evelyn immediately, and from the slight narrowing of her eyes, it was clear she had already decided exactly who Evelyn was. Someone browsing beyond her class. Someone wasting time. Someone who didn't belong among clients who casually spent six figures before lunch. Rebecca crossed the marble floor slowly, her heels clicking sharply through the boutique. "Good afternoon," she said, though warmth never reached her voice. "Our Emerald Collection starts at around $400,000. Were you looking for costume jewelry, perhaps?" A few nearby customers glanced over. One older woman wrapped in fox-colored cashmere laughed quietly under her breath. Evelyn remained calm. "No," she answered softly. "I came to see the Royal Emerald set." That changed the atmosphere immediately. Even among Bellamy and Company's elite inventory, the Royal Emerald set carried almost mythical status. The necklace featured 13 Colombian emeralds surrounding a rare center stone deep green in color, with a faint silver fracture line visible only under direct light. Rumors claimed collectors in Dubai had offered over $7 million for it. Another customer turned fully now, openly studying Evelyn with amused disbelief. "Honey," the woman said, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist, "that necklace costs more than your entire apartment building." Soft laughter spread nearby. Rebecca's lips curved slightly. "The Royal Emerald set is reserved for serious buyers." Evelyn's eyes shifted toward the glass display in the center of the room. Beneath the chandelier lights, the emerald necklace rested against black velvet, like something stolen from European royalty. For the first time since entering the boutique, emotion flickered faintly across her face. Not greed. Not awe. Recognition. Slowly, almost absent-mindedly, her fingers touched the small antique gold necklace resting at her own collarbone, hidden partly beneath her cardigan. It looked old and unimpressive compared to the diamonds surrounding her, but engraved near the clasp was a tiny symbol nearly identical to the crest embossed on the legal envelope inside her folder. No one noticed. Rebecca stepped closer. "Ma'am, clients viewing that collection typically schedule appointments in advance." Her gaze dropped deliberately toward Evelyn's damp shoes. Perhaps our silver section would be more comfortable for you. More laughter. A younger sales associate standing near the watches looked uncomfortable, but stayed silent. Evelyn continued studying the emeralds behind the glass. The room watched her now the same way wealthy people sometimes watched outsiders in expensive places, with that mixture of amusement and suspicion that only appears when someone challenges invisible social rules without saying a word. Rebecca folded her arms. Unless you intend to purchase the Royal Emerald set today, I'd appreciate it if you didn't touch the display. Evelyn finally looked at her directly. Her expression stayed polite, almost gentle. I only wanted to inspect the center stone, she said quietly, because the fracture line shouldn't be visible from this angle. The smile disappeared from Rebecca's face, and for the briefest second beneath the chandelier lights, something cold passed through the room. The boutique remained unnaturally quiet after Evelyn's comment about the fracture line. Crystal light shimmered across the emerald necklace while several customers exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to laugh again or pretend they had not heard her at all. Rebecca Hall recovered first. Her expression settled into the same polished smile wealthy establishments perfected whenever they wanted to remove someone without causing a scene. I assure you, she said smoothly, our gemstones are inspected by certified experts from Geneva and New York. There is nothing wrong with the necklace. Evelyn did not argue. She simply kept her eyes on the center emerald resting beneath the glass. The faint silver line, hidden deep inside the stone, caught the chandelier light for half a second before disappearing again. Rebecca noticed Evelyn's silence and mistook it for embarrassment. Perhaps you saw a reflection, she continued gently, though the superiority in her voice only sharpened. These pieces can be overwhelming for first-time visitors. A soft chuckle drifted through the showroom. The woman in the white designer coat took another sip of champagne and leaned toward her companion. I told you she was pretending, she whispered loudly enough to be heard. People watch too many movies and suddenly think they understand jewelry. Nearby, a gray-haired man wearing a gold Rolex glanced at Evelyn's old cardigan and frowned with visible annoyance, as though her mere presence had interrupted the atmosphere of exclusivity he paid for. Bellamy and Company thrived on appearances. Every polished marble surface, every velvet chair, every smiling associate existed to reassure wealthy clients that they belonged to a higher world than everyone else. And Evelyn, standing there with rainwater still darkening the hem of her jeans, disrupted that illusion simply by refusing to feel ashamed. Rebecca stepped beside the display case and subtly placed herself between Evelyn and the necklace. Miss, she paused deliberately, I do not believe I caught your name. Evelyn Carter. Rebecca repeated it once in her head without recognition. If the name meant anything to her, she hit it well. Miss Carter, she said, clients interested in the Royal Emerald set typically provide proof of appointment before private viewing. Her eyes drifted toward the worn leather folder in Evelyn's hand. And because the piece is insured for over $7 million, we maintain very strict protocols. Evelyn nodded faintly. That makes sense. The calmness of her response almost irritated Rebecca more than confrontation would have. Most people in Evelyn's position either apologized nervously or became defensive. Evelyn did neither. She simply stood there observing the necklace with the quiet concentration of someone studying something deeply personal. The younger sales associate from earlier approached, carefully carrying a silver tray of champagne flutes for nearby customers. As he passed Evelyn, Rebecca stopped him with a glance. Not there, she said quietly, though everyone heard it. Those are reserved for purchasing clients. The associate hesitated awkwardly before lowering the tray and walking away. Another ripple of amusement moved through the room. Evelyn's expression did not change, but one older woman watching from across the boutique lowered her eyes uncomfortably, as if the moment had crossed a line even among Manhattan's wealthy social circles. Rebecca folded her arms neatly. Perhaps our catalog section would be more appropriate, she suggested. There are many beautiful pieces available at more accessible price points. Evelyn finally looked away from the necklace and met Rebecca's gaze directly. Her eyes remained calm, steady, unreadable. I did not come for the catalog section. Rebecca's smile tightened. Then may I ask what exactly brought you here today? For a brief moment, Evelyn's fingers brushed the edge of the cream-colored envelope partially hidden inside her folder. The silver crest embossed near the corner flashed beneath the chandelier light before disappearing again under her hand. No one seemed to notice except the older woman near the watches, whose eyes narrowed slightly in curiosity. "I came because this necklace should not be on display," Evelyn answered softly. Silence settled again. Somewhere deeper inside the boutique, a piano version of Moon River drifted through hidden speakers, almost painfully elegant against the growing tension. Rebecca let out a restrained laugh. "And why is that?" "Because the center emerald was reported missing nearly 12 years ago." Several customers exchanged glances. Rebecca's expression hardened instantly. "Miss Carter," she said carefully, "I think there may be some misunderstanding about the nature of this establishment." Her voice lowered, becoming colder now. "Bellamy and Company does not entertain conspiracy theories from random walk-in visitors." The words landed harder than open insult because of how professionally they were delivered. A wealthy brunette near the diamond cases shook her head with visible disapproval. "Honestly," she murmured, "security should screen people better." Evelyn heard every word. Still, she remained composed. No anger, no raised voice, only patience. That patience unsettled the room more with each passing minute because people accustomed to power expected humiliation to produce visible weakness. Evelyn gave them none. Rebecca glanced toward the security guard near the entrance, a silent signal passing between them. The guard straightened immediately and began walking slowly across the marble floor. Several customers noticed and subtly stepped aside, eager for the scene to end. Rebecca returned her attention to Evelyn. "I am going to ask you one final time," she said with polished authority. "Do you intend to make a purchase today?" Evelyn looked once more at the emerald necklace beneath the glass. The silver fracture line glimmered faintly beneath the lights like a scar hidden inside the stone. Then her eyes drifted toward the antique necklace resting against her own collarbone. Her thumb brushed the tiny engraved crest near the clasp, a movement so small almost nobody saw it. Almost, because at the far end of the showroom, the older woman near the watches suddenly went pale. Her champagne glass lowered slowly in her hand as recognition flickered across her face. The older woman standing near the watches lowered her champagne glass with trembling fingers, her eyes fixed not on the emerald necklace inside the display case, but on the small antique pendant resting against Evelyn's collarbone. Unlike the others in the showroom, she was old enough to recognize details younger people overlooked. The tiny engraved crest on the clasp, the unusual shape of the gold chain, and most of all, the calm way Evelyn carried herself while being quietly humiliated in front of half the boutique. Rebecca Hall noticed the woman staring. "Mrs. Beaumont?" she asked politely. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor Beaumont hesitated for only a second before forcing a smile. "No, nothing at all." But her expression said otherwise. Around them, the atmosphere inside Bellamy and Company had shifted from amusement into something sharper. The wealthy clients no longer looked merely entertained. They looked curious now, almost irritated that Evelyn refused to break under pressure. One of the men near the diamond section adjusted his cufflinks and muttered to his wife, "People like this always create scenes in luxury stores." His wife nodded while pretending not to stare directly at Evelyn's damp cardigan and inexpensive shoes. Nearby, two younger associates whispered quietly behind the register, glancing toward the security guard now positioned only a few feet away from her. The guard himself remained professional, though his posture had changed. Alert now, watchful. Rebecca folded her tablet against her chest and smiled with controlled patience. "Miss Carter," she said, "our clients are beginning to feel uncomfortable." The irony of the statement hung heavily in the air because Evelyn had done nothing except stand quietly beside the display. Still, several customers nodded in agreement simply because Rebecca sounded confident when she said it. Power often belonged to whoever spoke with the most certainty. "I apologize if my presence is inconvenient," Evelyn replied softly. Her voice remained steady, almost impossibly calm considering the dozens of eyes watching her. Rebecca tilted her head slightly. "Then perhaps you understand why this situation needs to end." The security guard stepped closer across the marble floor. Not aggressively, just enough to make the message unmistakable. Evelyn glanced briefly toward him before lowering her eyes to the old leather folder in her hands. Slowly, She rested her fingertips against the worn edge as though reassuring herself of something inside. That tiny movement caught Eleanor Beaumont's attention immediately. Her face tightened further. Rebecca noticed it this time. "Mrs. Beaumont?" she asked again. Eleanor forced another uneasy smile. "You said her name was Carter?" Rebecca nodded casually. "Apparently." The older woman looked back toward Evelyn with growing unease. "Interesting," she murmured under her breath. The younger customers nearby did not understand the tension building around her, but Rebecca began sensing it. And sensing uncertainty made her more determined to regain control of the room. "Miss Carter," she said firmly now, "if you are not making a purchase, I will have to ask you to leave the showroom." A brunette socialite standing beside the sapphire collection crossed her arms with visible satisfaction. "Finally," she muttered. "Honestly, this place used to feel exclusive." Another customer laughed softly. "Next thing you know, people will wander in wearing sweatpants asking for crown jewels." More quiet laughter followed. Evelyn listened without reaction. She did not lower her eyes. She did not argue. She simply looked once more toward the royal emerald set beneath the chandelier lights. Then she asked a question so calmly it immediately silenced the nearest conversations. "Who authorized the current appraisal certificate?" Rebecca blinked. "Excuse me." "The certificate attached to the emerald collection," Evelyn repeated gently. "Who signed it?" Rebecca's polished composure tightened. "That information is confidential." Evelyn nodded slightly, as though she expected the answer. "Was it Harold Bennett?" This time the silence spread wider. One of the sales associates near the watches looked up sharply. Harold Bennett was one of the most respected gemstone authenticators in New York. Very few people outside elite auction circles even knew his name. Rebecca recovered quickly, though the faint tension in her jaw became visible now. "Mr. Bennett occasionally works with our private collections," she admitted carefully. "Why?" Evelyn did not answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her cardigan pocket and removed an old silver flip phone. The device looked strangely out of place inside the glittering boutique filled with million-dollar jewelry and designer handbags. Several customers exchanged amused glances at the sight of it. Rebecca almost smiled again. "Of course she carries that," her expression seemed to say. But Evelyn calmly opened the phone and dialed a number from memory. The entire showroom watched in growing confusion as she waited quietly with the phone against her ear. No panic, no embarrassment, just patience. After a few seconds, someone answered. "Good afternoon," Evelyn said softly. "This is Evelyn Carter. I need to confirm whether Harold Bennett completed the updated authentication report on the Bellamy Emerald Collection." The moment she spoke the name clearly into the silent showroom, Eleanor Beaumont nearly dropped her champagne glass. Rebecca noticed immediately. So did everyone else. Evelyn listened for a few seconds without changing expression. Then she glanced once more at the emerald necklace behind the glass. "I understand," she said quietly into the phone. "Thank you." She closed the phone gently and slipped it back into her pocket. Rebecca crossed her arms tighter now. And what exactly was that supposed to prove? Evelyn looked at her with the same calm expression she had worn since entering the boutique. "Only that Harold Bennett stopped authenticating the royal emerald set 8 years ago," she answered softly. "After he discovered the center stone had been replaced." The room went completely silent. No one spoke for several long seconds after Evelyn mentioned the replaced emerald. The silence hanging inside Bellamy and Company no longer felt elegant. It felt fragile. Crystal chandeliers still glowed warmly above the showroom. Champagne still sparkled inside delicate glasses, and soft piano music still floated through hidden speakers. Yet something underneath the luxury had shifted. Customers who moments earlier had laughed openly now exchanged cautious glances instead. Rebecca Hall noticed it immediately. She had spent years controlling rooms exactly like this one, and she recognized danger the moment authority began slipping away. Her expression hardened with professional precision. "That is enough," she said sharply. The polished warmth disappeared from her voice entirely now. "Miss Carter, Bellamy and Company will not tolerate false accusations against our business." Evelyn stood quietly beside the display case, her hands resting lightly on the old leather folder. "I made no accusation," she answered calmly. "I only stated a fact." Rebecca gave a short, humorless smile. "You walked into a private luxury showroom dressed like you came from a grocery store during a rainstorm, interrupted our clients, questioned our authentication process, and now you are implying fraud involving a $7 million collection. Her voice carried farther now, carefully controlled so every customer could hear. I believe that qualifies as more than a fact. A few customers nodded immediately, relieved someone had restored the social balance they preferred. The brunette socialite folded her arms tighter. Honestly, Rebecca, you should call corporate security already. The older man with the Rolex added quietly. This is exactly why serious establishments require appointments. Eleanor Beaumont remained silent near the watches, though her unease had become impossible to hide. She watched Evelyn with growing tension, as if struggling to decide whether to say something she was not yet ready to reveal. Rebecca stepped slightly closer to Evelyn. Bellamy and Company serves a highly selective clientele, she said. And while we strive to be welcoming, there are standards that must be maintained. The meaning behind the words settled over the room immediately. Standards, appearance, status, belonging. Every wealthy customer understood exactly what she meant. Evelyn looked around the boutique slowly. Marble floors polished to mirror brightness. Diamond bracelets resting beneath velvet glass displays. Tailored suits. Designer heels. Faces trained to recognize wealth within seconds. Then she looked back at Rebecca with the same quiet composure that had unsettled everyone since she arrived. I see, she said softly. Rebecca nodded once, satisfied to finally regain control. Good. Then you understand why I am asking you to leave. The security guard moved closer again, stopping respectfully beside the display case. Not threatening, just final. Several customers visibly relaxed, expecting the uncomfortable situation to end at last. But Evelyn did not move. Instead, she gently opened the old leather folder in her hands for the first time since entering the showroom. Inside rested several neatly organized documents, cream-colored papers edged with dark green trim, and beneath them a photograph partially visible beneath transparent protective covering. Rebecca's eyes narrowed instantly. Miss Carter, she warned, you are creating a disturbance. Evelyn ignored the comment. Her fingertips paused briefly against the photograph before sliding it carefully back beneath the documents. The movement was small, almost absent-minded, yet Eleanor Beaumont suddenly took a sharp breath from across the room. Rebecca heard it. So did Evelyn. The older woman quickly lowered her eyes into her champagne glass, but the damage was done. Curiosity spread through the showroom again like a quiet ripple. Rebecca's patience snapped tighter. Sir, she said firmly to the guard, please escort Miss Carter out of the showroom. The guard gave a respectful nod and turned toward Evelyn. Ma'am, he said politely, I am going to have to ask you to come with me. Still Evelyn remained calm. No embarrassment, no panic, only that same impossible patience. She closed the folder gently and looked toward the royal emerald set once more. The center stone glimmered beneath the chandelier lights, the faint silver fracture line barely visible beneath the surface. Then Evelyn spoke a single sentence that changed the atmosphere of the room all over again. If I leave now, she said quietly, you will sell stolen property before 5 o'clock. The room went still. Rebecca stared at her. One of the younger associates near the register nearly dropped a velvet jewelry tray. The brunette socialite gave a nervous laugh, though it sounded forced now. This is insane, she muttered. But even she no longer sounded certain. Rebecca crossed her arms tightly, struggling to maintain composure. You have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. Evelyn finally looked directly at her. Actually, she answered softly, I know exactly whose collection that necklace came from. A cold silence spread across the marble showroom. Outside, the rain continued streaking against Fifth Avenue windows, while headlights reflected across wet pavement below. Inside Bellamy and Company, nobody seemed interested in champagne anymore. Rebecca's jaw tightened visibly. This conversation is over. Evelyn gave the smallest nod. That depends entirely on whether Harold Bennett arrives before the police investigator does. The security guard froze. Beside her, several customers exchanged alarmed looks. And for the first time since Evelyn entered the boutique, uncertainty appeared clearly in Rebecca Hall's eyes. Rebecca Hall held her composure together with visible effort, but the certainty that had filled her voice minutes earlier no longer sounded natural. The boutique remained wrapped in tense silence while customers pretended not to stare directly at Evelyn Carter. Crystal chandeliers continued scattering warm reflections across marble floors, yet the elegant atmosphere Bellamy and company prided itself on now felt strained, brittle, almost nervous. The security guard remained beside Evelyn, though he no longer seemed eager to escort her anywhere. Even he sensed something had shifted beyond ordinary customer conflict. Rebecca straightened her navy blazer and forced a controlled smile. Threatening a business investigation does not change the fact that you are trespassing in a private showroom, she said carefully. And I strongly advise you to stop making reckless statements before embarrassing yourself further. Evelyn did not react to the insult. Her calmness had become almost unsettling now, especially because she never once raised her voice or attempted to dominate the room. She simply stood there holding the old leather folder against her side, while wealthy strangers judged her appearance beneath chandelier light. Across the showroom, Eleanor Beaumont finally stepped forward. Slowly, hesitantly. The older woman's heels clicked softly against the marble floor as several customers turned toward her with curiosity. Rebecca blinked in surprise. Mrs. Beaumont. Eleanor ignored the question. Her attention remained fixed on Evelyn's necklace. May I see the pendant you are wearing? She asked quietly. The room fell still again. Evelyn looked at her for a moment before gently touching the antique gold pendant near her collarbone. Of course. She carefully lifted the necklace forward beneath the chandelier light. Gasps moved softly through the nearest customers. The tiny engraved crest became fully visible for the first time. An emerald green shield surrounded by silver vines with the letter C carved into the center. Eleanor Beaumont's face lost color immediately. My God, she whispered. Rebecca frowned. What is it? Eleanor looked toward the royal emerald set inside the display case, then back at Evelyn's pendant. That crest, she said quietly, almost to herself. I have only seen it once before. Rebecca's confidence faltered slightly. Seen what? Eleanor lowered her voice further. At the Carter Estate auction in Connecticut 11 years ago. Several customers exchanged confused looks. Rebecca forced a small, dismissive laugh. There are thousands of Carter families in America. Not like that one, Eleanor answered. The words landed heavier than anyone expected. Rebecca crossed her arms again, clinging visibly to authority. Even if this woman once attended some estate auction, that does not explain why she is standing in my showroom accusing us of fraud. Evelyn remained composed. I never accused Bellamy and company directly. Rebecca stared at her. You implied the necklace was stolen. I implied the original center stone disappeared years ago. The correction sounded small, but it carried weight. The distinction mattered. Eleanor Beaumont looked suddenly troubled. Rebecca, she said carefully, perhaps we should contact Mr. Whitmore before forcing her to leave. Rebecca turned sharply. Absolutely not. But the firmness in her voice sounded thinner now. One of the younger associates behind the register suddenly stepped forward holding a tablet computer. Rebecca, he said nervously, I think you should see this. She shot him an irritated look. Not now. It is about the Carter name. That caught everyone's attention instantly. Rebecca hesitated before snatching the tablet from his hands. The showroom watched silently as her eyes scanned the screen. At first her expression remained annoyed. Then something changed. Very slightly. Her jaw tightened. She looked up at Evelyn, then back down at the tablet again. Where did you find this? She asked quietly. Client archives, the associate answered nervously. The system flagged the family crest when I searched the appraisal records. Rebecca's fingers gripped the tablet harder. One customer near the diamonds whispered softly, What is happening? Nobody answered. Evelyn remained still while Rebecca slowly looked back toward her. You have been here before, Rebecca said carefully now. Not a question, a realization. Evelyn nodded faintly. Long ago. Rebecca's polished confidence cracked almost invisibly beneath the chandelier lights. Why was there no active profile under your name? Because my family closed all accounts after the Hartford investigation. Eleanor Beaumont shut her eyes briefly at the mention of Hartford. Clearly she remembered more than she wanted to say aloud. Rebecca lowered the tablet slightly. That investigation was sealed. Evelyn's expression never changed. Yes, she answered softly. It was. A hush fell over the room. Customers who had mocked Evelyn less than 20 minutes earlier now stared at her with entirely different eyes. Not respect yet, but uncertainty. And in luxury spaces built entirely around status, uncertainty spread faster than panic. Rebecca tried once more to regain control. Even if your family once had ties to this collection, she said carefully, that still does not authorize you to enter a private showroom and disrupt our clients. Evelyn gave a small nod as though acknowledging the point. Then she calmly opened the leather folder again and removed a single cream-colored document. She did not wave it dramatically. She simply held it gently between her fingers. Eleanor Beaumont recognized the silver embossed seal immediately. Her champagne glass lowered once more. "Rebecca," she whispered urgently, "do not make this worse." Rebecca looked toward the document despite herself. Near the bottom of the page, beneath formal legal lettering, a signature appeared clearly in dark ink. Harrison Whitmore, Senior Counsel, Carter Holdings International. The same Harrison Whitmore who sat on the board overseeing Bellamy and Company's insurance partnerships. Rebecca's face changed completely for half a second before she caught herself. But by then, everyone in the room had already seen it. The moment the name Harrison Whitmore appeared on the document, the atmosphere inside Bellamy and Company changed completely. The wealthy clients standing beneath crystal chandeliers no longer looked amused. They looked cautious now, their eyes moving between Evelyn Carter, the legal document in her hand, and Rebecca Hall, whose polished composure was beginning to crack beneath the pressure of too many unanswered questions. Rain continued streaking softly across the tall Fifth Avenue windows, while passing headlights reflected against the marble floor like restless shadows. Rebecca lowered the tablet slowly, forcing herself to remain calm. "A legal signature does not prove ownership," she said carefully. "It certainly does not justify disrupting a private showroom." But even she no longer sounded convinced by her own words. Evelyn simply slid the cream-colored document back into the leather folder with quiet care. "I never claimed ownership," she answered softly. "Not yet." The sentence settled over the room with unsettling weight. Nearby, the brunette socialite who had mocked Evelyn earlier shifted uncomfortably beside the sapphire display. "Rebecca," she whispered nervously, "perhaps this should be handled privately." But Rebecca had already gone too far to retreat gracefully. Luxury spaces survived on hierarchy. If she backed down publicly now, every wealthy customer watching would remember it. And Rebecca Hall built her career on never appearing uncertain. She straightened her posture sharply. "No," she said firmly enough for the entire showroom to hear. "This situation has already wasted enough of our client's time." She turned toward the security guard beside Evelyn. "Escort Miss Carter out immediately." The guard hesitated, only for a second, but everyone noticed. Rebecca's voice sharpened. "Now." Before the guard could move, Evelyn calmly placed the old leather folder on top of the velvet display counter beside the royal emerald set. The sound was soft, yet somehow it silenced the room more effectively than shouting ever could. Slowly, she opened the folder fully for the first time. Several neatly organized documents rested inside beside a faded photograph, a dark green envelope embossed with silver lettering, and an old brass key attached to a leather tag worn smooth with age. Rebecca frowned immediately at the sight of the key. Eleanor Beaumont went pale again. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "look at the tag." Everyone's eyes shifted toward the small brass key lying inside the folder. Engraved into the leather tag were 3 words in fading silver letters. "Hartford Vault B." A hush spread across the showroom. Even customers with no understanding of the Carter collection recognized the sudden tension moving through the room. Rebecca forced a cold laugh that sounded painfully artificial now. "This proves nothing." Evelyn looked at her calmly. "Then why does it make you nervous?" The question landed harder than any accusation. Rebecca's jaw tightened visibly. "I am nervous because my showroom is being interrupted by someone who clearly enjoys creating dramatic scenes." Evelyn nodded faintly, as though considering the point seriously. "And yet I am not the one who called security over a necklace." Several customers looked away awkwardly. Rebecca ignored them. "You know what I think?" she said suddenly, stepping closer to Evelyn. "I think you researched an old estate scandal online, found a family name connected to it, and decided to walk into a luxury boutique pretending you belong here." The words echoed sharply across the marble showroom. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Rebecca glanced deliberately toward Evelyn's faded cardigan and rain-worn shoes before delivering the sentence that froze the room completely. "Because people who truly belong in places like this do not arrive looking like they cannot afford cab fare home." Silence. Absolute silence. Even the hidden piano music suddenly seemed distant beneath the weight of the insult. The younger sales associate behind the register lowered his eyes immediately. Eleanor Beaumont looked horrified. The security guard shifted uncomfortably beside the display. But Rebecca stood tall beneath the chandelier lights, convinced she had regained control by saying aloud what many wealthy people in the room had silently believed since Evelyn entered the boutique. Evelyn herself remained perfectly still. No anger crossed her face. No humiliation. Only quiet patience. Slowly, she reached into the folder and lifted the faded photograph resting beneath the legal documents. It showed an elegant ballroom from years earlier, filled with formally dressed guests beneath massive crystal chandeliers almost identical to the ones hanging above Bellamy and Company now. At the center of the photograph stood an older man wearing the royal emerald set around the neck of a smiling young girl no older than 12. Rebecca's confidence faltered the moment she saw the image. Eleanor Beaumont took a sharp breath. "Oh my God," she whispered, because the young girl in the photograph was unmistakably Evelyn. Same calm eyes, same soft features, same antique pendant resting against her collarbone. Evelyn gently placed the photograph beside the brass key without drama or triumph. Then she asked a single quiet question while the room watched in complete silence. "Would you like me to call Harrison Whitmore myself?" she said softly. "Or would you prefer explaining this to him without me?" Nobody spoke. The chandeliers shimmered overhead while rain tapped softly against the windows. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Rebecca Hall looked genuinely afraid. Rebecca Hall could not look away from the photograph lying beside the brass vault key. The image rested beneath the chandelier lights like evidence no amount of polished confidence could erase. A young Evelyn Carter smiled beside an older gentleman wearing a dark tuxedo, while around her neck rested the unmistakable royal emerald set. The exact necklace displayed inside Bellamy and Company only a few feet away. No one in the showroom spoke. Wealthy clients who had mocked Evelyn's clothes now stared at her with stunned silence, their champagne glasses forgotten in trembling hands. Even the security guard had taken a step backward from the display case, as though instinctively realizing he was standing in the middle of something far larger than a customer dispute. Rebecca swallowed carefully before speaking. "That photograph could have been copied," she said weakly. But the sentence collapsed the moment it left her mouth because even she no longer believed it. Eleanor Beaumont slowly approached the counter, her face pale, beneath the showroom lights. "No," she whispered. "I remember that gala." Every eye turned toward her. Eleanor's voice trembled softly as memories surfaced. Hartford Estate Foundation Ball. 12 years ago, Richard Carter unveiled the Emerald Collection publicly for the first time after the restoration. She looked directly at Evelyn now. "You were his granddaughter." A hush fell across the marble showroom. Evelyn did not answer immediately. She simply rested one hand lightly on the leather folder while rain shimmered against the Fifth Avenue windows behind her. The silence itself became confirmation. Rebecca's composure finally fractured. "This is impossible," she said quietly. "The Carter estate dissolved years ago." "Part of it did," Evelyn answered softly. "The foundation did not." Rebecca stared at her. Nearby, one of the younger associates whispered under his breath, "Oh my God." The words spread through the room almost invisibly as realization began connecting pieces everyone had ignored earlier. The family crest on the pendant, the Hartford vault key, the legal documents signed by Harrison Whitmore, the calm confidence, the fracture line in the emerald. Suddenly Evelyn's simple cardigan and quiet demeanor no longer looked out of place. They looked deliberate. Rebecca looked toward the royal emerald set behind the glass display, and then back at Evelyn again. "Who exactly are you?" she asked finally, though her voice no longer carried authority, only uncertainty. Evelyn met her eyes calmly. "My name is Evelyn Carter." She paused gently. "Chairwoman of the Carter Foundation Trust." The room went completely silent. One customer nearly dropped his champagne glass against the marble floor. Another associate behind the register covered her mouth in shock. The brunette socialite who had mocked Evelyn earlier slowly lowered her eyes, unable to meet her gaze anymore. Rebecca herself looked frozen beneath the chandelier lights. Because everyone in Manhattan's luxury circles knew the Carter Foundation Trust. Old money, historic collections, private museums. Insurance partnerships. Quiet influence woven through banks, auction houses, charities, and luxury institutions across the East Coast. The Carter family rarely appeared publicly anymore after the Hartford scandal years ago, but their names still carried enormous weight inside elite financial and collector circles. And standing in front of them all was the woman they had treated like an unwanted stranger. Evelyn continued calmly, never raising her voice. 3 months ago, the foundation resumed ownership investigations involving several missing pieces connected to the Hartford inventory records. She glanced toward the emerald necklace, including that collection. Rebecca's lips parted slightly. You are saying Bellamy and Company is under investigation? No, Evelyn answered gently. Not unless someone knowingly concealed the replacement stone. That distinction mattered. Everyone in the room understood it immediately. Rebecca looked physically ill now as she realized how dangerously close she had come to accusing and humiliating someone with enormous legal and financial authority tied directly to the collection itself. Eleanor Beaumont slowly shook her head. Richard Carter used to say the family taught humility before luxury, she murmured softly. That is why nobody recognized her. Evelyn gave the faintest smile at that. Nothing arrogant, nothing triumphant, just quiet sadness mixed with patience. My grandfather believed people reveal themselves most honestly when they think someone has nothing to offer them. The sentence settled heavily across the showroom. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The hidden piano music drifting through the boutique suddenly sounded painfully small beneath the silence. Rebecca finally lowered her eyes. For the first time since Evelyn entered the showroom, she looked uncertain not about policy or procedure, but about herself. About every assumption she had made within seconds of seeing simple clothes and rain-worn shoes. Miss Carter, she said quietly. I did not realize. Evelyn interrupted softly before the apology could fully form. That is the point. Rebecca fell silent immediately. Evelyn glanced once more toward the royal emerald set beneath the chandelier lights. You saw a woman in a cardigan and decided she could not possibly belong here. No anger colored her words. That somehow made them hit even harder. Around the showroom, wealthy clients avoided eye contact entirely now. The older man with the Rolex suddenly became very interested in the marble floor beneath his shoes. The brunette socialite quietly set down her untouched champagne glass. The younger sales associate who had searched the archives looked ashamed for not speaking sooner. Evelyn gently closed the leather folder and picked up the brass vault key. I came today because the foundation received notice that the emerald collection would be transferred to a private overseas buyer at 5 o'clock. She looked directly at Rebecca. I wanted to verify whether the original center stone had truly resurfaced. Rebecca's face drained of color completely. Transferred. Evelyn nodded once. Through Bellamy's international auction partner. A terrible silence spread across the room as everyone realized the timing. Another hour, and the necklace might have disappeared again into private ownership beyond easy recovery. Rebecca stared at Evelyn with growing horror. You mean? Evelyn's eyes settled calmly on the emerald display one final time. I mean, the Carter Foundation remains the legal beneficiary attached to the original collection. The room went silent so completely that even the sound of rain against the windows suddenly felt loud. The silence inside Bellamy and Company no longer felt tense. It felt heavy, like the entire showroom had finally been forced to confront something ugly hidden beneath all the marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and polished luxury. Rain continued sliding down the tall Fifth Avenue windows, while the emerald necklace rested untouched beneath velvet glass at the center of the room, suddenly transformed from a symbol of wealth into evidence of how quickly people judged others by appearance alone. Rebecca Hall stood frozen beside the display case, her carefully perfected confidence gone completely now. The same customers who had laughed beside her less than an hour earlier avoided looking in her direction. Nobody wanted to be connected to what had happened anymore. The brunette socialite quietly picked up her handbag and stepped away from the emerald section entirely. The older man with the Rolex stared awkwardly toward the watches near the back wall. Even the hidden piano music drifting through the boutique sounded distant now, almost embarrassed to interrupt the silence. Rebecca finally spoke, though her voice had lost all traces of superiority. Miss Carter, she said softly, I owe you an apology. Evelyn looked at her calmly, but said nothing. Rebecca lowered her eyes briefly before continuing. I made assumptions about you the moment you walked through those doors. Her voice trembled slightly beneath the chandelier lights. And I allowed those assumptions to affect how you were treated in this showroom. Eleanor Beaumont closed her eyes for a moment, as if relieved someone had finally spoken honestly. Nearby, the younger sales associate who had searched the archives looked visibly ashamed. Rebecca glanced around the boutique at the wealthy customers who had watched the humiliation unfold in silence. That should never have happened here. Evelyn listened quietly without satisfaction or anger. She simply stood there holding the leather folder against her side, while the rain outside softened into a steady mist across Manhattan streets below. Rebecca swallowed carefully. I judged your value by your clothes before I ever listened to your words. The sentence settled painfully over the room because everyone present knew they had done the same thing. The brunette socialite finally stepped forward, avoiding direct eye contact. I am sorry too, she admitted quietly. What I said earlier was cruel. Evelyn gave her a small nod. Thank you. Nothing more. No humiliation in return. No lecture. Somehow that kindness made the shame in the room feel even stronger. The security guard beside the display case straightened slightly. Ma'am, he said respectfully to Evelyn. I apologize for how this situation was handled. Evelyn looked toward him gently. You were doing your job. Rebecca stared at the emerald necklace beneath the glass. The transfer scheduled for 5 o'clock will be canceled immediately, she said firmly now. I will personally contact the auction partner and suspend all movement of the collection pending foundation review. Evelyn nodded once. That would be wise. Rebecca hesitated before asking quietly, what happens now? Evelyn glanced around the showroom slowly. The same showroom where customers had measured human worth through shoes, jackets, and social status only an hour earlier. The same room where people assumed quietness meant weakness and simplicity meant insignificance. Then her eyes returned to the emerald necklace. Now, she answered softly. The collection goes through proper authentication. Rebecca nodded immediately. Of course. Evelyn reached toward the leather folder and carefully removed another document. She placed it gently on the velvet counter between them. Rebecca looked down in confusion before her eyes widened. It was not a lawsuit, not a legal threat, not a demand for damages. It was an authorization agreement allowing Bellamy and Company to cooperate directly with the Carter Foundation during the investigation. Rebecca looked stunned. You are still willing to work with us? Evelyn's expression remained calm. One mistake does not define an entire institution. Rebecca's eyes lowered again with visible shame. But it does reveal character, Evelyn added gently. The room fell silent once more. Eleanor Beaumont gave the faintest nod as though hearing an old truth spoken aloud again. Evelyn continued softly. Luxury means nothing if dignity disappears the moment someone walks in wearing ordinary clothes. Several customers lowered their eyes completely now. The younger sales associate near the register looked close to tears. Rebecca carefully signed the temporary suspension form with shaking fingers before handing it back. Thank you for giving us the chance to correct this. Evelyn accepted the document quietly. Then she looked once more toward the royal emerald set beneath the chandelier lights. My grandfather used to say real wealth is revealed by how people treat those they believe can offer them nothing. Nobody in the showroom could escape the meaning behind those words. Outside, a black town car slowly pulled up beneath the glowing Bellamy and Company sign. Through the rain-streaked windows, several people noticed the driver step out, holding an umbrella beside the curb. Rebecca saw it too and suddenly seemed to understand something else. Evelyn had never needed to prove she belonged there. She had known it from the moment she entered the boutique. That was why she never raised her voice, never begged for respect, never defended herself desperately. People secure in their dignity rarely need to announce it. Evelyn closed the leather folder gently and picked up the old brass vault key from the counter. The tiny silver Carter crest caught the chandelier light one final time. Around the showroom, nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered. The same people who once looked at Evelyn with amusement now watched her with quiet respect. And standing there beneath crystal lights and reflected emerald glass, Rebecca Hall finally understood the lesson she would remember for the rest of her career. The most valuable thing in the room had never been the necklace. For several long moments after Evelyn Carter finished speaking, nobody inside Bellamy and Company moved at all. The crystal chandeliers still glowed warmly above the marble showroom, but the atmosphere beneath them had transformed completely. Earlier that afternoon, the boutique had been filled with quiet judgment, whispered laughter, and people measuring human worth through polished shoes and expensive coats. Now the room stood wrapped in silence, the kind of silence that only arrives after truth forces everyone to see themselves clearly. Rebecca Hall slowly looked around the showroom at the customers who had witnessed everything. Some avoided eye contact entirely. Others stared toward the floor with visible embarrassment. The brunette socialite who had mocked Evelyn's clothes earlier now stood near the entrance, clutching her handbag tightly, unable to hide the shame written across her face. Even the older man with the Rolex seemed smaller somehow beneath the chandelier lights. Eleanor Beaumont finally stepped closer to Evelyn and smiled softly. "Your grandfather would have been proud of you today," she said quietly. For the first time since entering the boutique, genuine warmth touched Evelyn's expression. "He taught me that dignity matters more than appearances," she answered. Eleanor nodded gently. Most people spend their entire lives learning that lesson too late. Near the register, the young sales associate who had searched the archives hesitated before walking toward Evelyn. "Miss Carter," he said nervously, "I should have spoken up sooner." Evelyn looked at him kindly. "You search for the truth when everyone else preferred assumptions." The young man lowered his eyes modestly. Evelyn reached into the leather folder and removed a business card embossed with the Carter Foundation crest. She handed it to him calmly. "The foundation will be expanding its archival department next spring," she said softly. "People who pay attention to details are difficult to find." Shock crossed the young associate's face. "You mean a job?" Evelyn gave a small nod. "If you are interested." Rebecca watched the exchange quietly, understanding the deeper meaning immediately. Evelyn had every opportunity to humiliate the people who humiliated her. Instead, she chose fairness. The lesson landed harder than anger ever could. Outside, the Blacktown car waited beneath the glowing storefront while rain mist drifted across Fifth Avenue. The driver stood patiently beside the curb, holding a dark umbrella. Inside the boutique, Rebecca took a slow breath before stepping forward one final time. "Miss Carter," she said carefully, "I know an apology cannot undo what happened today." Evelyn met her gaze calmly. "No," she answered softly, "but accountability matters." Rebecca nodded faintly. "Bellamy and Company will fully cooperate with the Foundation review." Evelyn closed the leather folder gently. Then this afternoon was not a complete loss. Rebecca looked down briefly before speaking again. "May I ask you something honestly?" Evelyn nodded. "Why did you not tell anyone who you were when you first walked in?" The question lingered quietly through the showroom. Evelyn glanced once more around the marble floors, the velvet jewelry cases, and the faces that had judged her within seconds of arrival. Then she answered with the same calm grace she had carried all day. "Because if respect only appears after wealth is revealed," she said softly, "then it was never respect to begin with." Nobody in the room could respond to that. A hush fell across the boutique, so complete that even the sound of rain against the windows seemed louder. Rebecca lowered her eyes slowly, absorbing every word. Evelyn picked up the brass Hartford vault key from the counter and slipped it carefully into her coat pocket beside the antique pendant resting against her collarbone. Then she turned toward the emerald display one final time. The royal emerald set shimmered beneath the chandelier lights, beautiful and untouchable behind glass. But now it no longer represented status or luxury. It represented memory, legacy, family. Truth finally returned to the light after years hidden away. Evelyn rested her fingertips gently against the glass for just a moment. "My grandmother loved emeralds," she said quietly. "She used to say they reveal cracks more honestly than diamonds do." Eleanor Beaumont smiled sadly. "Perhaps people are the same way." Evelyn gave the faintest nod. Then, without arrogance or triumph, she turned and began walking toward the entrance. The entire showroom watched in complete silence as her worn brown shoes crossed the polished marble floor that earlier had seemed determined to reject her presence. No one laughed now. No one whispered. The same people who once looked at her with suspicion now stepped aside respectfully as she passed. The security guard opened the glass door for her personally. Cold rain-scented air drifted softly into the boutique from Fifth Avenue below. Before stepping outside, Evelyn paused briefly near Rebecca. "One more thing," she said gently. Rebecca looked up immediately. Evelyn glanced toward the younger associate, still holding the Carter Foundation business card, with stunned disbelief. Promote people who notice character before status, she said softly. Your clients will trust you more for it. Rebecca's eyes filled with quiet emotion. I will. Evelyn stepped outside beneath the umbrella held by the waiting driver, while Manhattan traffic reflected silver and gold across rain-soaked streets. The Blacktown car door opened beside her, but before entering, she looked once through the boutique windows behind her. Inside Bellamy and Company, every person in the showroom still stood silently beneath crystal chandeliers. Watching the quiet woman they almost threw out walk away with more dignity than anyone else in the room had managed to display all afternoon. And as the car disappeared slowly into the rainy Manhattan evening, the lesson she left behind remained standing there long after the emeralds stopped shining. True worth was never measured by clothes, titles, or appearances. It was measured by how someone treated a stranger before discovering they were important.